냠제 점보도는 유미종 또는 모는 점보는 가자다 다그러 다른 전도 실문도 또만 제잔라기 숑살.
To liberate sentient beings, please generate the supreme bodhicitta before we start today's teaching.
데네 제단담바 람줄라 제단담바 가다야 버침보당 제단담바 고총 침보당 제단담바 몽거기 버침비 숭은 마투바남 더스타업 정든디 le tuso zedan damba shari laname bayan da por zob shan chiptum ngumber ngonsum de longtomba toni ngomsir de ker mat de ker shindog gawer kirti di zenar tanle dan de jondan de kalawa der shinba lakum chogba chig de zarte bimo yebil hanga salap zene jondan de kalawa de loks tharmo jar tet de jondan de lam ngundur taja 립듯 ngumbrत rap듯 신듯 제단담바 라 제단담바 제단 디츠 존든데 란드르키치 소르도 존든데 다적 르게흐튼 코네 게르롱거 겐든기 나나야 네프튼데 지르데 르게샹 코고 르겐코고 샹 다적 닝을렌데 바토 냠네 존든데 다적 라나메 바 yang dagbar zobo shanchip to zombar mamchi de dagchagno zondip zambi rungo ma togba go ganga tsenap jondan de chur tonjang jondan de rang de jigbar ker de chusha pa de la dagchag jam chibir ker di tsenap jondan de dagchag jam randam chi jam jondan de la rang de timbre kro giba da yanlag da nyanglag jam zhon charwa da cig da cig nam jam zhon char do jondan de di la de jondan de ji chu dan na yang dongba nya dam sama me ba da mumba me ba dam chi dag chig go jo ji sang ji ji chun da 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 sang ji ji jing go pa da 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 shanchib san hui number rorwa de jin shig bir number rorwa da dagchig rewa mafkie to de ji la de jena jondan de ndartar de dagchig kamsum ne shong tem nyang len de bernd shi sha dagchig ner ge shan ko be di la de jondan de dagchig shanchib san wa lana me pa yang da ber zog be shanchib de long tan jang tam mo ki jondan de la dagchig rewi sim chig ja keper keper majir de jondan de dagchig jondan de ki zhongdu gongni nyantur namjang laname bayang dobar zobar shanchib kirwa long tamba toni ngomsir dar matta kirto jondan de deyim charla devjang shagba khsun ngun matu ba namba ndartaba toni dagchig nibachim tobo jondan de dagchig rumboche tobo jondan de dagchig tsat mamchi bi rumboche tobo jondan de dagchig maflang mapzir mapsim marmu barandır tabi rumboche ndo tode jondan de dagchig bobo de rakshagba bobo jondan de ndartate huirna mulala ji ndartar pei ganni loksam chi ba de lokshigdam chine yirshugshigdo chide dedang ter lo mangdo nyeshigam samchigam jibchigam ngapchigni de jondan de deni mati chembojig chembojig dagtig bana deyan warpurkenin soan sorjan tsat tsarma tang ratbi hlat chogdam chongsamsam chine yershug chigdo shinde di padeyang yergjandam chibadam nordam dromodam zotam wangwa mangbor kirde xerdam ngardam noradam matigdam benjiyadam tongdam manshirdan shiradam salevjamdam ngur godpadam dambar kirde jampodam jammodam siglep giba jonsha sorbi mamambur kirla lambo chedan stadang janshidang walandang ligmambo dang dambar kirde ayog mangjang yirchimbo nangna nordang damba lagba ndawa dang perwa dang mowan chorwa yang mangda kirde jondan de deni mubgarpo de sarma dang rapan chorwi hlat zhongdang zhongkir dang zhongdir dang zhongdang yirnkur dang gyarpu phupchang tharji kyamba le dena nordam zhomba zotang wang mangbo chibi me de gangnam chibi zhongkir der shinde jondan de dene mogorbo de pa nordam zhomba zotang wangbo mangbo chanda de zhongkir na ne jang lo ngapchi varta tongwa te tagda rgendo chande chanjang yang dag chigbi nang dag dongwa ma to bar jan salaga murma bar dag nyam dag jan dag ner gejan kog deg tig bana daglam joma dang ser dang nur dang jadam zotang amanda yoda dag vanag chigyang medal dag chiwe tifshi bir kirden dartal dagjig mafshi bir Chizubr Madyer, Nyamda Tivshird, Vati, Tane, Kiema, Karte, Vati, Nurji, Tsukundala, Shopirna, Dagningan Deper Kervar, Semla, Jondan de Tena, Mugurbote, Radbadan, Sarman Sorjam, Tar, Gin, Romadang, Serdang, Noradam, Judam, Zut, Wang Mambo, Jangi, Kim Ti, Nekala Varterum, Chide, Jondan de Tene, Mugurbote, Pate, Dagkim Chi, Changi, Chaurgona. Tramze dar jarig dar jirig da omarg jin kur chembo yonso korim dangi tedi sant chembo sigten dam jebar xser da ngir ji shind jambam chinim jumbo shiwa chagki shopa te ngayep ki yob jang lapchep ji bi savshos medo sirman torja jumbo chem changwa gyangwa na njur longkyu chembom chibab jondende mugurbote rang pade rangim chip chang chavrgo ni Namban Tartavi Longsho Bam Chijan, Kiwo Parwachi Yonsu Korne, Kyomdaka Sigli Gibam Tonte, Tone Jan Jixian Chagle, Maganer, Puzanjam Kete, Rat Yitna de, Ndanyam the Semter, Garbogam Lombo Chimbo, Ndodam the Lordam Chade, Ndano, Dagla, Shawa Chiang Meiki, Dal, Gurbu Nekala ter Song, ter Daki Zedan Ku, Nyum Mumga, Mumwar, Nyun Mumwar Netje, Dagam der Randa Togzan. Murungo, der Waxamdo, Zondo Zentam, Nibajan Lagam, Chapper, the Mom, Nyam ne, Jordan de Tene, Mogorboten, Jigbab Gidmer, Yellap Gibe, Chagne, Mater, neighbor around Trudim Chibada. Jordan de Tene, Mushik body, Dakam sheep drunk chargo, ne Sanki Chalam Chipe, Daka Vum Toma, Tagda, Mum Sadim, Tony Yang Gamgarante, Rapta Gajan, Gavata, Yid Dever, Kerne, Dunyamda, Droma, Danserdan, Noradam, Jadam Zotan, Vanvi, Lonshu Chimbon, Dalapshapan, Durter Nietia. Dagna, Genko Tigne, Dakian de Ned, Shira Chane, Yid Yang Ko, Dagnin, Gonala, Mum Sarchego, Nyam the Semso. Jordan de Tene, were trippy, Doana, Tice, Kajik Tanchi, Yitsam Tela, Mum Yuba de Kede, Jobo, Daga, Tang, Murte, near the Chelte, Shochi, Gune, Jordan de Tene, de Tamchi, Yober Girne. Mugurbote Zonatan, Jordan de Tene, Mwambote, Jixian Terne, Morganer, Pezanjan, Gibarap, Yidma de Jangavi, a Jatabo Shone, Kujon Donjon, Kua Kila Niba Jones, Yamashina, Zitzer Mede, Tene, Mede, Nangi, Mugurbote, Kujon Donjon de Chabadan, Tene, Mugurbote, and Jixian Trabe, Ganer, Pezanjan, Gipirap, Yidma de and Darter Daxot, Chine, Marunwar. Marun war Mushagam, Nyam the same Jantive, Gerte, Tolan Gerte, Gerte, Tolan Gerte, Nuber Kerala, Party, Neva, Jignam Chine, Ti Metedala, Ketchak, Mugate, Chate, Maunwar, Gerchak, Chitramote, Torji, Tekich Mebadan, Jan, Mumchi, the Tihlat, Jena, Kemder, Dagnam, Tuchimbo, Dambala, Mogorwondana, a Mambala Mubran Sarnin, Kemdak, Lagber Yam, Serna, Jondan de Tena, Kemdak, the Talam Kepi Lat, Darchak, Lag Shiz, Young Mumchi. Jordan de Tene, Kimdak de Murjanjigla, Kima Kyodo, Sonte, Mugurbo, Pav, La, Kima Kyodo, Tanga Par, Gavran Roa, de Rako, Jiv, Guji Jim Chimana, Lab Gavjan, Sarji, Matite, Nyane, Mugurbo, Tikalavartim, Chide, Shinne, Mugurbo, La Kima, Kyodo, Mukyodo, Tanga Kar Gavran Roa, Rako, Jiv Gibada, Tene, Mugurbo. Sigde Tubadan, Womserdan, Matashon, Tobergeni, Sif Jotene Laneti, Mogurbo, Nebakala, Terin, Sarvadan, Rapan Soris Lat, Chide, Tini, Kimdati, Mogurbote, de ngbi la ta tawlam ke bar jarwe de la do murdig jam dang ngambi mgni jig tang te khirni tang te re gongwala mte la khechak tsingd nyimi lang galar ki nyimi lang galar ki ngi khimderle shet jigba tang ka te ter term de nyam de le chusha ji zerwa tang kheni ki te la ner ke jirme wa ngi ni dang han jig de chagdur bi phombo chakko ji music ji giba da mate ni ji jam mogorwo te tsar te sigle giba te jin da jibne mate deni mate ni da mogorwo te da munur chimbo te lang te kim te na ya shagdar ji pombo shajan munur chimbo ti kim junggo jimbo kyurwo na ne jam chiba da mubshik bo dem tong ne kar da kar khong na ne ba da shagdar dim chagbam tong te ngum sar da kirde te ni kim da dem changwa da yan Trurde ratpa zongbo jambo chimbo parne rapa trmajan sarte dagcha ka ne ne wabne sigba yomba kumba thogde shigdir ji da lila gubur giwa da mrombo ne majan wikala var terim chi de shine ndarkut chod mankor bar kumba thogla chigdir kyushig jim cheba da tamd vati me de yandark jibge so ki chod dni ne liv shula shirjan da manro jig da Kyoki Laf Kite Jeno Chola Chedon Chukubate, Vumbi Renam, Yana Rivi Renam, Yanam Trivi Renam, Yana Shinga Renam, Yana Lansi Renam, Yana Zesam, Yana Kujan Ronte Tedakion, Zemba Meber Lonshi Dangi, nga la river nyamba yopa te ni la chyo yang gona yang la logic da nge khela jeno ki ve ti tu yoshi ji jumba te ta ve chola chudon chgu ba te dan te tam chi kyan chola jeno ve chodo nyang le me bar shwa da chod ti pa chirta te vjen do chodi nga la yang sonji ti ji jirje na nga na chodo ngar gan chodo jon te chodi ni shigdir ji pombo ndo shigji li mangbo ji de kema cholle shi de shepi tse gema Gam Kyagam, Yoagam, Narjeram, Chaba, Shmun Shibagam, Shibayam, Mete, Chirtaram, the Janli, Shibi, Tena, Kyunte, Yola, Chola, Nabatam Chita, Nibate, Chigan, Mam Tonve, Tang Pancho, Nala, Kyuni, Ninga, Versta, Veteter and Java, Yeno, Juntan de Tini, Chemterti, Mogurwote. La vizib takso mogurbuti yang kimdakte la paraji ndashifke de jondende nabanda kimdakte ven sarvar kune gonglo nishi vardı vete de shigdirgi pombo shigdir chede tene gonglo nishi debada mogurbuti kimdakte se chi pchnger latam chi balan zemba mamchi birkirde shurwote na ane sham chi bale jondende gi tene kimdakte Chun sarvar kirte dag kumbe tila baba tongne te mogurwa te landir kichi kima chut sirshukjang ngim roma dang ser dang ngir dang numzhe dang mzo dang wangwa shind mambo yoban dadag yang natsib chi na te dag sala yang jimba dang si langwa dang kang langwar sha te dag tamchi kyoji shibir dodo te jishir jena chirtar ngangun nuru dobur kirwa dang kyokyang te vizhin dang ngi ndali kyoki da chungzi kyang chit magzin chijim shiba 나 정든데 되네 먹을 보때 남장디 kimdang di imroma dang serdang nordang amjudam zuddang wang rabdam mambo namte dom chibran sarwana dar tinila rewa mamchi shang thana chi pongbo keng rantang zamya te la chongzi kyang nor mamchi de sif shiro te na ne jam chi ne guru samba te ni jang jis semzo chongden de te ne kimdag de te zhi ni jang yongsir membran tsar de sem ter de ya chimbur sem jang ngun guru samna nyam ngi ngo tsar me bar tsar ne dang gumbi Tilava Pitsina, Mogorbote, Kugte, Nietin di Bambo, Chadner, Gerbodon, Lombodon, Chonderdi, Madan, Yergi Mem, Dundam, Munsum, the Underkitcher Meso, Chut Nyonjin, the Ko, Shnungo, Ko, Keparte, Chonkirgi, Mander, Tavajishavan, and Kamne Lur, Napchilonde, Diman, the Jishavadan, Ko, Man, the Jishavadan, Ko, and Sorusher, the Chonkir, Den and Dergon, so, Dena, Ko, Way and the Kona, the party of the Yobadan, non Shuba Yoba Tamchi, Mandel, no ko na go nor jongzu yoba te genjang danila ti shiso jisheba dang jongden de ji tene mo gorbo ti cender ta da tune ngom sar mat jirde ndar taraf dak charlam joma dang ser dang nor dam zhe dam zot dang wang mong bor ni do nyam de sem so jongden de tejin da na tejin shigba dagjing na tejin shigbi che dang jar te tejin shigba na dagjig la ti ji ni wo go jib ka tsar de kimdag te chirtawa jeno.
It takes about 15 minutes. Next, we will briefly talk about the significant Lotus Sutra. Please do not allow yourself to fall asleep. If you were to succumb to sleep, you would not even be able to receive the sacred transmission, let alone truly hear and comprehend this profound and invaluable teaching. Therefore, to liberate all sentient beings from samsara, please generate supreme bodhicitta before today's teaching. Now, with this foundational understanding, let us proceed to discuss the magnificent and truly wondrous Lotus Sutra. In the sacred Lotus Sutra text, the first and second important chapters come first naturally. The third chapter is the famous parable chapter. The fourth chapter is the willing acceptance chapter. For example, in ancient China, some great Buddhist masters, like the renowned Master Kuiji, believed that this willing acceptance chapter is connected with the third turning of the Dharma wheel by Shakyamuni Buddha. It is profoundly combined with the significant meaning of the third turning of the Dharma wheel. There are also other wise teachers who interpret it in this way. The willing acceptance chapter mainly discusses aspects of willing acceptance within the Mahayana tradition. So-called willing acceptance refers to faith, as everyone knows, having faith in the Mahayana teachings. Moreover, this particular kind of true faith is completely unobstructed and thoroughly understood properly. Ordinary blind superstition or simple naive faith is definitely not called willing acceptance. We should first carefully explain this important concept to everyone clearly. If we practice the sacred Lotus Sutra diligently, the merit is truly immense and beneficial. Let me share two stories here. One of the stories also comes from the biography of the Lotus Sutra. There is such a story in the biography of the Lotus Sutra. This happened during the time of Emperor Wu of Liang. At that particular time, he specifically required the esteemed leaders of every single province and prefecture across the entire country to ensure that everyone in each respective place meticulously copied the sacred Lotus Sutra, and immediately after diligently assigning this crucial and significant task, dedicated special personnel were promptly dispatched to thoroughly inspect and verify the progress and quality of the work. At that time, there was an elderly woman, specifically named Shenmu. She held some deeply ingrained wrong views and was especially unwilling to diligently copy the sacred Lotus Sutra properly. She thought to herself, then for this entire month, I'll just discreetly hide somewhere else quietly. She meticulously planned to emerge again only after the campaign or special event was completely finished and over. So she carefully hid in a temple for a full month. After that entire month, she truly thought for sure that the whole situation was completely over. Then, when she finally came out, she saw some soldiers and police officers on the road. At that very moment, she became extremely frightened and ran for her dear life. She truly thought they were coming after her and was very, very scared. Later, she wasn't paying attention on the road and fell down. After falling, she seemed to lose consciousness. Eventually, she arrived before King Yama in the intermediate state. King Yama then began to severely and sternly scold her. But he firmly said, "Your precious life is certainly not over yet. You absolutely should go back now." She herself also admitted that she had not shown respect to the Lotus Sutra before. King Yama also said, "Because you were so disrespectful to such a sacred sutra, you almost died." She deeply regretted it herself, feeling a profound sense of remorse. After she returned to the human world, she devoted herself to copying the Lotus Sutra twice. Originally, she truly didn't want to copy it, but later she actually did indeed do it and even became a nun. There is quite a very fascinating story. So when it comes to the Lotus Sutra texts, whether it's copying them or printing the scriptures, many people attach great importance to this. This is very meaningful. Of course, there are some people who, for the sake of their own fame, burn the Lotus Sutra. Recently, there have even been some people doing this. These people might be complete outsiders, not practicing Buddhists at all. That's one important thing. There's also another similar case like this. It seems it's not from the traditional Lotus Sutra biographies, but from another detailed historical account of the merits of the Lotus Sutra. There was a person who was originally a monastic, but later she eventually returned to a secular lay life, a woman. After she returned to her ordinary lay life, she then lived in a state of extreme and profound poverty, facing significant hardship. Later, when she had a child, she didn't even have clothes to wear. When she was a nun before, she had copied the Lotus Sutra onto some pieces of white cloth. Later, she very carefully took that pristine white sacred cloth and used it to make comfortable warm clothes for her beloved young child. After some considerable time had slowly passed by, the child's mother tragically developed all kinds of painful festering sores on her entire body, and many repulsive white worms began to eat her tender flesh. She suffered terribly, enduring immense pain, and eventually died in the midst of her agonizing wailing. At the very moment of her death, a clear voice resounded distinctly in the air, saying, "The record of miraculous responses to upholding the Lotus Sutra explicitly states, destroying the sacred sutra to a clothing brings forth this kind of severe retribution, and the inevitable result is to fall into the deepest hell. Therefore, when it comes to the physical copies of the Lotus Sutra, including the fine cloth used to carefully wrap it and the delicate paper used to meticulously copy the sacred Lotus Sutra, all of these should be treated with respect and offered reverently. During our lifetime, everyone should do this. Otherwise, even if you may not necessarily destroy it for others, for example, some individuals deliberately burn the sacred Lotus Sutra and some actively slander it. Some people even attack it vehemently in various languages. Perhaps even in this very life, one will clearly experience the direct consequences. Everyone should pay careful attention to this important point as well. One significant aspect is about merit, and the other is about the faults that come from being disrespectful. I'm sharing these two stories. Next, we will continue with today's topic, which is the fourth chapter. That is the chapter on willing acceptance. When discussing this chapter on willing acceptance, it begins with wisdom life subhuti, which refers to subhuti, who is foremost in understanding emptiness. Here, regarding subhuti, yes, it can be explained this way. There is also the Venerable Mahakatyayana, whom we often call Gadayana, as well as the Venerable Mahakashapa and the Venerable Mahamodgalyayana. These were indeed the very elderly and venerable elders among the Śrāvaka community at that particular time. They heard from the Buddha profound things that had truly never been heard before, which were extremely rare, exceptionally precious, and deeply significant. Shakyamuni Buddha personally gave predictions at that time. Shariputra received the profound prophecy of attaining Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. At that significant time, they were indeed personally present at the Lotus Sutra assembly of the Buddha. When they heard this auspicious prophecy, this was a truly remarkable and momentous event. Everyone at the entire Dharma assembly was extremely joyful and found it rare and precious. Moreover, it was not the case that because these venerable ones themselves did not receive the prophecy, but they still rejoiced and were very happy for others. Unlike some of us who, in that very same situation, when someone else scores particularly high or truly wins a significant award, often become quite unhappy, deeply jealous, and genuinely upset, wondering why others receive it while I do not. There was nothing like that. You see, these arhats are indeed a bit different from others. They were extremely joyful. They felt it was truly rare and precious, something that had never happened before in history. After rejoicing deeply and feeling extremely elated, they respectfully stood up from their seats and carefully tidied their sacred robes. Then, with their right shoulders bared and right knees humbly touching the ground, they respectfully joined their palms together and bowed their entire bodies devoutly and reverently toward the Buddha. With an expression of profound and immense joy, they gazed intently at the radiant and venerable face of the world-honored one. Here it is explicitly stated that, yes, these esteemed elders, all of them, of course these particular elders as well, were present and observing. When it comes to such arhats, they too would tidy their robes. I also want to mention here that some of us, truly monastics, it is sincerely hoped that our monastic robes should often, indeed, if you are ordained, your sacred monastic robes should always be meticulously kept neat and tidy. This is especially crucial and important when you are going out or entering the city, as it reflects upon the monastic order, or even among the monastic community. Some individuals consistently wear their traditional robes in a very proper, dignified, and exceptionally elegant manner, always presenting themselves impeccably, which also looks very in accordance with the Dharma. But some people seem a bit wild and unruly, like Jigong, the famous eccentric monk's sister or brother, has suddenly shown up. They look a bit disheveled and topsy-turvy as well. Sometimes it also looks particularly undignified, appearing quite awkward and rather ungraceful. I hope that no matter the occasion, generally in Chinese Buddhism, many monastics behave very quietly and peacefully. But when compared to Theravada Buddhism, I truly do feel that many Theravada monastics often exhibit even purer and more disciplined deportment. By comparison, among some traditional Tibetan Buddhist monastics today, some are still quite fine, but some are a bit concerning. When you look at them, it's rather troubling indeed. The other day we clearly mentioned that recently near our famous Larung restaurant, there's a new modern coffee shop established there, right? I asked the manager not to let them come. Otherwise, seeing the actual behavior of some lamas is not always very pleasant. It's not that they've committed any truly serious offenses or anything like that, you see. But whether it's the distinctive way they walk or the particular way they talk, many of their observable actions don't truly resemble those of a very peaceful, contemplative monastic. Sometimes you can really, truly tell. It might not be 100% absolutely accurate, but you can more or less make a reasonable guess. For monastics, their overall demeanor is also very important. It's precisely the same for lay people as well. As Buddhists, we sincerely hope that some of us Buddhists are especially sloppy and careless, whether it's the way we dress, not washing our faces or not washing our hair. The clothes we wear are also especially dirty. Especially some lay practitioners living in Tibetan areas, when you see them, it's really, when you get quite close to them, it's like there's already a really bad smell even before you actually arrive. Some people are like this, not everyone. Some of them are in Tibetan areas where perhaps the conditions are very poor. But nowadays, no matter which monastery you're in, it's not like that anymore. If you should maintain good hygiene, some individuals are even worse than the local Tibetans. As for the local Tibetans themselves, their sense of personal hygiene is already a bit lacking. But I truly hope that some dedicated lay practitioners who are studying Tibetan Buddhism, when you go to Tibetan areas to study Tibetan Buddhism, don't pretend to be an accomplished practitioner when you haven't achieved anything. That's really not a good thing, especially when it comes to tidiness and dignity in your clothing. When we observe people in a particular setting, it is often possible to discern the overall taste and atmosphere of the place by carefully looking at others' clothing and general demeanor. So, sometimes individuals who completely lack proper manners are quite noisy and excessively rowdy, speaking loudly wherever they go, even in certain settings. Sometimes just by looking, you can tell it's not a very refined environment. As monastics have their own code of conduct and dignity. As lay practitioners also have their own decorum. When you go to some Western countries, you can feel this very clearly. In many places, our overall quality really still needs significant improvement. So sometimes, as it has been mentioned here, even an enlightened arhat should meticulously tidy their robes, all the more so for us ordinary people who often in numerous aspects should learn to use right knowledge and right mindfulness to observe our own body and mind. We should also be mindful of the way we speak. When speaking in different situations, our words should be relatively refined and elegant. For example, when walking, the other day I saw two monastics walking over there. They were from our side as well. I asked them, which class are you from? Although they didn't do anything seriously improper, their behavior still wasn't quite in accordance with the Dharma, including the way they walked. Perhaps they haven't studied the monastic precepts. That's why we require that monastics should ideally study the precepts. You should understand proper deportment. It's also important to know what kind of conduct is expected of monastics. The very same goes for lay practitioners as well. If even arhats indeed need to truly tidy their robes, then for the rest of us it's quite essential. At that time, these arhats, the four great arhats, represented some of the Śrāvakas, and reported this before the Buddha, saying the following: "We, these arhats, are already at the very head of the monastic community. They are indeed and truly elders. And in terms of their chronological age, they are indeed quite advanced in years, having already reached a considerably elderly stage of life. They also firmly believe that they have already successfully attained the profound state of nirvana. So now, when it comes to liberating sentient beings, they feel they are not up to the task. There is nothing else they can do, nor have they aspired to the Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, spoken of in the Mahayana. They spoke very honestly before the Buddha. We have been listening to the Dharma here for a very long time, and we are considered elders. Some of us here are great Dharma teachers. We are already great Dharma teachers. Now we are quite old, and our overall health is not very good. At this point, we no longer seek to liberate sentient beings, going out to teach the Dharma, leading classes, teaching the 5 great treatises. These are all things we are unable to do. Now we just stay nearby in places like Markang and Kangding and simply practice our skills and abilities there. But this isn't really the ideal situation or arrangement, is it? As responsible and experienced elders, we should also, in the end, they themselves also come to realize their own situation. The world-honored one has been teaching the Dharma since long ago and has continued to teach for so many years up to now. We have also been listening to the world-honored one's teachings and lectures all along because it has been such a long time now. When we listen to the Dharma in front of the world-honored one, our bodies are tired and our minds are also a bit weary. Moreover, we are simply visualizing things such as the emptiness of essence, lack of inherent characteristics, and absence of aspiration for results, as taught in the Hinayana tradition. Non-action and formlessness, in other words, the 3 gates of liberation. But when it comes to the playful, miraculous powers of Mahayana Bodhisattvas, the pure Buddha lands, the maturation and accomplishment of sentient beings, and so on, our hearts feel no joy, any sense of delight whatsoever, no true happiness, no genuine pleasure. They just stated this directly, because we have been listening to the Dharma in front of the Buddha for such a long time. As a result, we become solely attached to the fruits of the Hinayana path. We have no desire or joy for liberating sentient beings or for attaining enlightenment. Why is this the case? The main reason is actually not our fault. World-honored one, you instructed us to renounce the 3 realms and attain nirvana. When you first taught the 4 noble truths, you already told us that the 3 realms are like a burning house, and that we must escape the 3 realms. We must attain the fruit of arhatship and true nirvana. So now we are all getting older. When it comes to the Buddha teaching bodhisattvas and anuttara samyak sambodhi, we do not give rise to even a single thought of joy or aspiration for it. They say, perhaps we could give rise to bodhicitta, a single wholesome thought to liberate sentient beings, but we simply do not have such thoughts. Maybe our Dharma friends feel the same way. After listening for so many years, 10 or 20 years, we are doing okay. Why liberate beings? I'll just focus on just practicing really well myself, and that's truly enough. Actually, this isn't really good either. We've listened to Mahayana Buddhism for such a long time. The more we think like this, the more we cultivate the intention to benefit sentient beings. It's not about liberating sentient beings. Some people give teachings and lectures. Some of our Dharma teachers are like this. It seems like every day I use these few Dharma teachers as examples. In fact, they are representative. Dharma teachers, in a broad sense, male and female practitioners, are Dharma teachers. So don't think it's just a few Khenpos and Khenmos, the Khenpos criticizing every day. That's not what I mean. Some of our Dharma teachers think that just giving teachings and lectures is enough, and they don't want to get involved in anything else. This isn't necessarily a good thing either. In the future, when you have opportunity to spread Dharma and benefit beings, you won't know how to do anything. Sometimes while you're developing your ability to teach and give Dharma talks, at the same time, you'll learn basic interpersonal skills. So sometimes I think to myself, the other day some people asked me if I ever get tired. I said, no, I don't. They asked, why not? You're running a school, doing charity work, still giving lectures here, and even building a Dharma hall. I said, as for these things, even if I have to attend meetings with some worldly materialist leaders, I feel this is a form of practice. If it's practice, it's a virtuous deed. And when it comes to virtuous deeds, many of us are willing to do them. So on the surface, it may seem like today I'm giving a lecture to the children, or I'm discussing temple construction with the workers, or talking about some design matters, just discussing these things. But on the surface, it looks like I'm just talking about construction projects. It's not that I'm going along with government officials every single day either. But in reality, I am actively and consciously managing my own personal mindset, you see. I feel that this is a kind of virtuous deed. My intention is not to do something for myself. It should be for a greater purpose. So if I believe this is a virtuous deed, then this is a form of spiritual practice. That's why many of our fellow practitioners should also sometimes adjust their thinking a little bit. If you only know how to listen and contemplate and nothing else, eventually you really become a bookworm. Just like in some universities in China now, there are some bookworms, intellectuals. He can only speak in the classroom and that's it. But outside the classroom, he's terrible at dealing with people and can't do anything. Even with a very simple problem, he ends up feeling deeply troubled inside. Sometimes interacting with different people is a valuable opportunity and also meaningful learning. When you encounter people with bad tempers, people with different views, or people who behave differently, at such times you can also learn from them. Perhaps your actions and some of your words can gradually influence and truly transform them. Or sometimes I might feel a bit troubled myself, but overall, if I treat it as a form of spiritual practice, I won't feel tired. Take a practitioner, for example. Think about walking all the way from here to Lhasa, whether on foot or by prostrating along the way. In their heart, they see it as a spiritual practice. If it's for spiritual practice, with a very strong will, they won't feel especially exhausted. So sometimes we shouldn't always think that I'm getting old now, my physical health isn't very good anymore. If your health really isn't good enough, you can definitely go get a proper, thorough medical checkup. Give me your test results. Let me just see if it's really that serious of a situation. If I personally don't fully understand it myself, I'll definitely ask a few trusted experts to take a closer look. Is it really that bad, truly? Sometimes when the mind is feeling a little unwell, we might mistakenly think the body is sick too, but that's not necessarily the actual case. Next, it clearly states, he explicitly said, we absolutely do not want to study Mahayana Buddhism at all. But today, in front of the Buddha, we have already heard it personally. Some of the Śrāvakas, representative ones, because there's a chapter on bestowing predictions coming up. In that chapter, many Śrāvakas receive predictions. First of all, the very first important significant one is the Venerable Shariputra has already received a clear definitive prediction. So he joyfully said, today we have finally heard it directly. Some of Śrāvakas have received the precious profound prediction of Supreme Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. This is a very joyful thing. It's truly unprecedented, truly wonderful. We absolutely never expected it to happen today, never even imagined it. It was completely and utterly unexpected. We never ever expected to suddenly hear something so incredibly and extraordinarily rare today. Moreover, we feel especially, truly and profoundly honored. We have gained immense benefit and great joy. It's like countless precious treasures have fallen from the sky, obtained without even actively seeking them out. As Śrāvakas, we have always only sought our own liberation and never especially aspired to Bodhi, nor thought about liberating sentient beings, nor thought about purifying Buddha lands. But in the very process of not actively seeking these particular things, if we suddenly receive them ourselves, then this is something really especially joyful. So next, he is going to tell a captivating story. In today's class, a story will be told. But I haven't looked at this particular story in great detail recently, so I'm not entirely sure if I'll be able to tell it properly today, but even if I can't tell it well, you all certainly can. You should be pretty good at telling meaningful, inspiring stories skillfully. For Śrāvakas to receive such a precious prediction is extremely rare and truly special indeed. In the Lotus Sutra biographies, I remember there's another one, a case about an ordinary monk receiving a significant prediction. As for this particular matter, perhaps even truly remarkable Śrāvakas like Shariputra also receive such predictions. Some individuals who have practiced diligently and well have probably also received profound predictions, haven't they? In the historical record known as the Lotus Sutra biographies, there is a notable monastic figure named Sengding. From his early childhood, he especially loved to diligently study and comprehend the profound teachings of the Lotus Sutra. Basically, every day he would stay up all night without lying down to sleep. It's said that he didn't sleep, but whether he truly never slept is unknown. He devoted himself wholeheartedly to practicing repentance and cultivation, relying on the Lotus Sutra. He kept this up continuously. But later, one very special blessed day, apparently on the 14th day of the 7th month, he saw the Buddha in a brilliant, radiant golden light directly in front of his own sacred monastery. He saw many enlightened Buddhas, each kindly giving him a precious prediction. First, the Venerable Vipassana Buddha gently told him, in the future, at a certain specific predetermined time, through the profound Lotus Sutra, your negative karma will be completely purified. In the near future, you will certainly receive a prediction. We are merely bearing witness to this, and so on. Later, all 7 Buddhas appeared and told him this. Furthermore, the 996 Buddhas of our fortunate aeon also appeared. Finally, Shakyamuni Buddha appeared and gave him a prediction saying that in the future he would become the Tathagata universal radiance. That was the prediction given. This is indeed an ordinary monk who attained this through his very practice. These are the words of Shakyamuni Buddha. Because he is the original teacher of our Dharma, he personally gave the prediction. So sometimes I think it is also mentioned in the extensive biography of the Buddha that all the other Buddhas are also very close to us and very important. But even more important are the Buddhas with whom we have a karmic connection. When we pray, it is even more important. Every single day when we engage in our spiritual recitations, we also devoutly recite the sacred prayer that is offered to the Buddha. When we earnestly pray, sometimes we should take a moment to truly reflect and consider that there is actually a method to praying. For example, when I deeply recite the sacred prayer to Guru Rinpoche, sometimes I make some soft devotional sounds, and then I continually keep visualizing in my mind as if warm tears are gently streaming down my face. And even the hair on my entire body stands on end from deep within. With that kind of profound faith, the Buddha's blessings upon oneself are truly immense. But if, when we recite, we do it half-heartedly, nodding off while eating and chanting the sacred words Om Mani Padme Hum, in that particular case, the overall effectiveness is not going to be very high either. So sometimes when we engage in prayer, the specific method or approach of praying is also extremely important. So here it is explicitly mentioned that the Buddha, specifically Shakyamuni, also bestowed upon him a profound prophecy. This prophecy was perhaps intended for a select few individuals, particularly those endowed with exceptionally sharp faculties, who, during the course of their usual spiritual practice, might experience it within their pure visions or vivid dreams. There are also such prophecies indeed received. This is just briefly mentioned here. Next, it mainly talks about how those Śrāvakas were very happy just now. They felt that if we hadn't sought the path in this way, how could we have received this prophecy today? How joyful it is to receive without even seeking. What an honor, that's what they said. Now, a very significant, important metaphor is carefully presented below here. The world-honored one, these four devoted, respectful bhikshus all spoke directly to the Buddha, saying, "Today, we would like to use a meaningful parable to clearly explain. We have just thoroughly discussed the profound principle of receiving without actively seeking. Once upon a time there was a man who was a devoted father and had a very young and innocent child. Later, quite unexpectedly and by accident, the loving father and his precious child became separated from each other. The child, now alone and vulnerable, had already departed from his father's side. And after the father had also departed, he then journeyed to another country and resided there for a full 10 years. As for the father and son, perhaps the child's mother had died, or perhaps she simply abandoned him and went off with someone else entirely. No one truly knows the full story. This was often the case with people in ancient times, and it remains precisely the same now. There are indeed all sorts of complex and varied situations that can arise. Since the mother was conspicuously not mentioned at all, there's really no particular need for me to investigate it either. A considerable amount of time passed. A decade, 10 years went by. Because the father and son were separated when the child was very young, 10 years, 20 years passed, and eventually 50 years had gone by. 50 years later, as for that very same child we mentioned earlier, he was already well over 50 years old. He was extremely poor, utterly destitute, and constantly wandered from place to place with no fixed abode. He begged for food and clothing everywhere he went. Gradually, with a determined spirit, he made his long journey back to his father's homeland. For some deeply unknown reason, the two of them had become separated. The child had not seen his father for a very long period of 50 years. They had completely lost contact. In the end, he returned to a specific and meaningful place. His loving father at first also really desperately wanted to find him everywhere. But despite searching extensively and tirelessly, he was never able to find his beloved missing child anywhere. He searched everywhere, going from place to place. Later, he settled down in a distant city and finally made it his permanent, comfortable home. In this bustling modern city, this father, actually this is quite remarkably similar to some of the real cases and deeply touching stories we hear nowadays, including the common themes and narrative frameworks of certain popular contemporary movies. But the fate of this father and his child was a bit different. He was especially wealthy. In his opulent household, after he settled down and made a comfortable home, his family possessed immense, unimaginable wealth with treasures beyond all measure. There was gleaming gold, precious lapis lazuli, and vibrant, exquisite coral among countless other priceless artifacts. Tibetan people truly value coral very highly and consider it a precious gem. As for the Han people today, what do they generally value most highly in the society? Precious, sparkling diamonds, am I right? Coral, amber, and also beautiful glass beads. Glass beads are beautiful crystal prayer beads and so on, often carefully used for various spiritual purposes. And his entire royal treasury was completely filled to the very brim with these incredibly precious and valuable treasures. Nowadays, many wealthy people with their considerable fortunes may not consider such traditional and ancient treasures to be particularly important or valuable in their modern lives. In contrast, some Tibetans proudly wear intricate and beautifully crafted gold rings, one ring here, one there, here and here, truly absolutely everywhere possible. All 10 fingers were completely covered in gleaming precious golden rings. There are indeed very wealthy people exactly like that too today. He also had many loyal, devoted servants, numerous important officials, and perhaps some local residents who consistently, faithfully followed him around. Some of them were his loyal servants, devoted maids, and he had many attentive attendants constantly and diligently serving him. He also had magnificent elephants, fine thoroughbred horses, luxurious ornate vehicles, precious cattle, valuable sheep, and so on, a great many of them indeed. There were quite a few such distinguished old, wealthy, influential men back then. Then, his business and profits extended throughout other countries. In other words, his entire economic income, which was quite substantial, involved many different countries and regions. Nowadays, some of our listed companies have numerous branches established in various countries all over the world, or they possess several chain stores and similar retail outlets and so on. Just like that, they are prominently present in virtually every country. He also had some merchants and traders who could accurately be described as astute and influential businessmen. Among those doing business, he knew especially many people, because when someone is truly wealthy, he might interact with people from all kinds of different countries, including all kinds of diverse business people. People like this come from various countries. The father was extremely wealthy, but the child, on the other hand, was quite extremely poor. Their destinies were also quite different. At this particular time, the poor, unfortunate child wandered aimlessly everywhere. In the end, it was also an incredibly astonishing twist of fate. After traveling through many diverse countries and numerous cities, he finally arrived in the city where his father lived. He had already reached that precise place as well. At that very moment, the father was constantly, deeply missing his beloved child. He often thought to himself, "Now, it's been more than 50 long years since I left my child." In the original Tibetan version, it states 50 years. However, here in the Chinese version, it says over 50 years. But he had never, ever told anyone, "I have a child who left me when he was very young." Maybe it was out of pride. He never mentioned it. He also never spoke about the child's mother, nor about the child. He said nothing at all. Because he was now quite successful, he was unwilling to do so. Some of us are like this too, aren't we? How many people are there in your family? There are quite a few in my family. It's actually pretty good. So where is your family from? My family is quite complicated. We're from all over, north, south, east, and west. Some people are it's like they're extremely particular about their own identity and everything else. But actually, there's nothing to it. For example, if your family is from Beijing or Shanghai, there are so many people in Shanghai. Just saying you're from Shanghai is no big deal. But some people are especially sensitive about it. How many people are there in your family? There are still a lot of people in my family, a lot of people. Using a lot and very good to truly describe it is quite common. This old father is like that too. He has truly never told anyone that he has a child who has already left. He never said that. But every single time he's all alone, he truly misses him so very much. He really longs for his presence. Sometimes he misses him deeply, sometimes he really resents him. Is the reason for the resentment because he ran away back then, or is it regret? There are all kinds of feelings. When people are generally together, there are also many pains, worries, and joys. And when they part, there are also many worries, pains, and longing. These are all quite normal occurrences. He thinks to himself, "Now I am already truly quite old. I've indeed grown very old indeed. After getting old, there is so much property. Gold, shining silver, jewels, the warehouses are all full of them. There are no direct descendants, no children to inherit this legacy in the future. Once I depart from this world, when I die, all the accumulated property and cherished possessions will be completely lost. There will be absolutely no one to entrust it to, no one to carefully look after it, and no one to preserve its value for generations to come. So he truly and deeply wishes how very much he hopes his beloved child could come back and get it once again. If his beloved child could take over and successfully manage all his vast property, how extremely happy he would be, without any sorrow whatsoever. He kept constantly thinking this way every day. Actually, this is a profound metaphor in many different ways. For example, as it is stated in the Śrāvaka Sutra, the Buddha often thinks of sentient beings, and sentient beings also do. The Buddha is like a mother, and sentient beings are like children. If the Buddha is always thinking of sentient beings, but sentient beings do not think of the Buddha, then this connection is also very difficult to establish. If we sentient beings keep the Buddha in our hearts, recite and remember the Buddha, then the Buddha will also appear before us. This is also mentioned in the Śrāvaka Sutra. The Śrāvaka Sutra says, if sentient beings keep the Buddha in mind and recite the Buddha's name in the present or in the future, they will surely see the Buddha. They are not far from the Buddha. So if sentient beings consistently and often think of the Buddha, contemplating his wisdom and compassion, and frequently remember the Buddha, holding his teachings and presence in their minds, then without any doubt, whether in the present moment or at any time in the future, they will most certainly be able to perceive and truly see the Buddha. They are not far from the Buddha at all. So here, for example, if an elderly father deeply misses his beloved child, it's precisely the same kind of profound feeling. The analogy between the Buddha and sentient beings, or between a child and their mother, often illustrates what? It often illustrates that there is a kind of mutual remembrance. If there is mutual remembrance between them, then through the invisible power of remembrance, there is a kind of coming together. For example, if the father often thinks of his child, the child might also think of him. But this is indeed quite curious, and it is rather very rare, truly, because the longing between the two, suddenly, on the surface, it seems like a coincidence that they come together at the same time. Even in the mundane world, if such causes and conditions exist, how much more so when it comes to our true and law-abiding remembrance of the Buddha's virtues? That is even more inconceivable. Therefore, if we remember the Buddha and think of the Buddha often, then the Buddha's blessings will naturally arise in our minds. Although the Buddha constantly blesses and cares for sentient beings, if we sentient beings do not think of or remember him, then we also cannot receive this connection or condition. So some of us say that there is no need to recite the Buddha's name, that reciting the Buddha's name is just an attachment and unnecessary. The Buddha is compassionate and treats all sentient beings equally. Yes, this statement is correct. The Buddha's compassion is impartial toward all sentient beings. But if we ourselves do not sincerely request it, nothing can be done. It's like a very wealthy and affluent person, but he unfortunately cannot truly see which impoverished beggars are genuinely in need of help. So if the beggar does not come to beg, the wealthy benefactor may not necessarily give to him. That's exactly why sometimes we really need to learn how to pray properly ourselves. As devoted Buddhists, it's essentially the same principle. Whether you pray sincerely to your spiritual guru, your personal yidam, or the enlightened Buddha, the more sincerely you pray, the more blessings you will receive. This is also mentioned in the words of my perfect teacher, isn't it? If you have supreme devotion and joy, you will receive supreme blessings and attainments. This is the reason behind it. So for us, even as the same person, even in the same situation we are in now, some people come with devotion and pray to the Buddha every day, and they receive the Buddha's blessings every day. Some people, after listening to the teaching, just toss the Lotus Sutra far away, completely disregard it, and instead start singing their own songs, enjoying themselves, watching their favorite celebrities, and observing various other engaging and entertaining things. Then what you will truly receive is the profound blessing of those beloved celebrities. You listen intently to whichever singer's captivating songs, or watch whichever actor's compelling movies. In that case, you will receive their blessing. But what kind of blessing is that really? You can't possibly become a celebrity yourself, so your afflictions may actually significantly increase. If we pray to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, those enlightened beings who have truly transcended the world, our minds will become more peaceful, and our afflictions will gradually be eliminated, which is very beneficial. Therefore, whether spiritual practice is good or not depends on mindfulness and cultivation, very important. Now, following right after is this story. Just now, wasn't that father constantly thinking about his child? And just as he was thinking, his poor son also, although he is indeed called a child, this poor son is already very well over 50 years of age at this point. So in that case, the father must actually be over 70. I just did the math, Because maybe after he turned 20-something, who knows. But nowadays it seems people have children. That day when we went to Africa, in certain traditional societies, it was not particularly uncommon for some young people to begin having children at the early age of 12 years old. There was a young 17-year-old girl who had already given birth to 2 beautiful children and had been happily married for a significant period of 5 years. I'm not entirely sure what their traditions and customs were like back then during that specific period. At that time, these venerable and respected individuals told the Buddha, explaining that the child was working everywhere, undertaking various odd jobs and frequently being hired out for different tasks. He went around, probably doing some rather humble and menial work, after many unexpected twists and surprising turns by a very coincidental and truly incredible turn of events. This son, who was working odd jobs, kept moving from place to place. Just like in many of our movies nowadays, in the end, many of them end up here. Actually, if someone were to make a film specifically about this, it would work. If I were the talented film director, or maybe I wouldn't be a particularly good actor, but I could definitely be the creative director instead. When the movie is finally completely finished, others might harshly criticize it publicly. In the end, if I don't become truly famous, that wouldn't work out very well. There are cases like this, as you all know. Then, after many twists and turns, he finally arrived at the courtyard of the wealthy father we just mentioned. He entered his father's courtyard. At this very moment, the poor little child stood quietly there to the side of the gate. From a distance, he saw his father again, but he didn't recognize him. At that time, the child didn't recognize his father. He clearly saw his father sitting upon a magnificent lion throne. Both of his feet were resting comfortably on a beautifully jeweled footstool. He was seated on cushions and stools made of precious treasures. There were also many Brahmins, Kshatriyas, and lay people present. Many people were already gathered around him. If someone is truly wealthy, there are always vast crowds of people surrounding them on both the left and the right. There were exquisite pearls and all kinds of precious glittering ornaments worth many millions. He himself probably loved to adorn himself with these beautiful things as well. Just like in Thailand, some kings are still heavily and elaborately decorated with numerous ornaments. It used to be precisely like this in Tibet as well. Even now, among some officials in China, the wealthier they are, the more corrupt they become. I once saw someone who was extremely wealthy, but his shoes were all tattered and quite worn out. Some people deliberately dress in a way that looks rather poor or even impoverished. This too is a kind of spiritual practice. So what about them, you might ask? That very old and wealthy man I mentioned earlier still had many loyal servants. Some of the servants were holding white fly whisks. They stood on both sides holding them. Above him there was a jeweled canopy and a precious parasol. There were also banners hanging down, beautifully adorned with all kinds of floral garlands. The ground was covered everywhere with spilled fragrant perfume. All kinds of exquisite flowers were scattered all over the ground. Many valuable treasures were also brought out. Perhaps a significant amount of precious items were coming in as income, and many valuable treasures were also generously given away to numerous others. There was a truly constant and dynamic flow of precious things continually going out and coming in. This involved a significant amount of thoughtful giving and reciprocal receiving and so on, creating a vibrant exchange. All kinds of decorations like this were present. His majesty and profound dignity were completely different and truly stood out from everyone else present. As for his son, when he caught sight of him from a considerable distance away, wow, this person is truly extraordinary and remarkable, a sight to behold. Not only does he have so much wealth, but the way he carries himself is also... There are so many people around him who are truly supporting him. At this moment, the poor child truly saw the power of his own father. He actually felt a bit afraid. How did I suddenly end up in this place? It seems a bit... He started to feel a bit panicked inside. He regretted coming to this place. He thought to himself in secret, oh wow, is this person a king or a high official or someone else important? I shouldn't have come here. This isn't a place I should be. I'm a bit scared. Then he said, I'd be better off going early to a poorer place. I'm just making a living for myself there. If I stay here for too long, there's a good chance I might encounter some significant danger, forceful coercion or severe oppression and so on. He started to feel a bit afraid. After he finished thinking, he hurriedly ran away. From a long distance, he looked over and didn't distinctly recognize his own father. But from far away, he saw certain familiar actions, and even some of his father's particular mannerisms. He thought, wow, so wealthy and noble. Maybe some of us, for example, we might feel that our own personal status is rather humble, or perhaps even insignificant, and suddenly enter a particularly magnificent and splendid palace. At that moment, he felt a bit scared. Oh no, maybe I shouldn't be here. I'm not someone who belongs in this place. He got himself ready to run away, preparing for a swift escape, and then quickly started running back with considerable haste. At that moment his father, the venerable elder, saw him clearly from his elevated position on the lion's throne. He distinctly saw his beloved child from a very great distance, observing his every movement. The moment he saw his child, he immediately recognized him. Even though 50 years had already passed, nowadays some of our children, after just a dozen or so years, can't even recognize each other. That happens too. But this father still, he was quite remarkable, both in wisdom and in other respects. He saw from a very great distance away that poor, unfortunate child. At that particular time, the poor child wasn't really a child anymore, you see. At this moment, his son saw him from over there. After seeing him, he already recognized him. He felt extremely, truly happy in his heart. He thought to himself, all this wealth I have accumulated finally has somewhere meaningful to go. There is hope now. There is someone reliable to depend on. This child, whom I think about day and night, every single day, today, I have finally truly seen him. He has naturally and quite expectedly come back to me. After he came, I was especially, truly, and profoundly happy. He thought, even though I'm old now, my deep attachment to my considerable wealth and to my beloved child, my profound clinging, has not grown old at all. It should still be precisely just like when I was much younger. How truly happy and overjoyed I am to finally see my dear child today. If it was someone else, they might have cried out loudly and rushed to grab him. But he was a truly wise person of great wisdom, so he did not do that foolish thing at all, because if that innocent child saw this very disturbing scene, the poor unfortunate son would have been utterly frightened and certainly run away. After he had run away, the elder immediately sent some people to search for him and immediately ordered them to quickly go forth and bring this particular person back to his presence. They swiftly went to catch that poor unsuspecting wanderer and forcibly brought him back. At that very moment, the poor unfortunate son was extremely frightened by the sudden turn of events. As they relentlessly chased after him, he became even more terribly scared. He thought that perhaps, in that very moment, he truly shouldn't have come here at all. As he continued to run desperately, he kept repeatedly asking, I haven't committed any sort of crime, so why are you all trying to catch me? But in the end, it was because the wise elder had firmly insisted that they absolutely must bring him back safely, no matter what. They absolutely didn't listen to him at all. No matter if he shouted or cried, whatever he did, they only and exclusively strictly adhered to the wise elder's orders. The more anxious he became, the harder they chased him. In the very end, they successfully caught him and brought him back. When he was finally brought back, the poor son thought to himself, I haven't done anything wrong, but since they've caught me, the outcome definitely won't be good. Either I'll be made a prisoner or maybe they'll kill me. At this moment, he was extremely, even more terrified, even more nervous and deeply panicked now. Later, in this state of extreme, overwhelming anxiety, he became completely suffocated and fainted directly to the hard, cold ground below. He passed out completely. He was just that utterly scared and helpless indeed. For some individuals of a considerably lower social standing, if they are caught in such a compromising situation by others, even before any formal punishment or disciplinary action is officially given, they might faint from fear. This is also a metaphor for the Hinayana practitioners. As for the Hinayana practitioners, they are cautious. They really can't accept some of the practices of the Mahayana. Didn't we mention in the words of my perfect teacher that when Atisha, the revered Buddhist master, came to Tibet, at first 2 monks came who practiced the 12 ascetic practices. When he taught them about the non-self of persons, they were overjoyed. But when he taught them about the non-self of phenomena, they started to get a little scared. Then explained Heart Sutra, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. They covered their ears and ran away. So when we talk to them about emptiness, it's exactly the same situation. Some people, when you try to get them to learn Buddhism, are extremely afraid. Some of our Dharma friends, family members, as long as you don't talk to me about learning Buddhism, I'll give you anything you want. But the moment you mention learning Buddhism, from that moment on, I will actively oppose all of your individual personal rights. Some individuals are said to be especially extreme and rigid about this particular matter. So this is just a matter of lacking the right karmic connection. Some people only study the Hinayana and not the Mahayana. There are people like that too. At that time, this child was also very pitiful. He was so incredibly scared that he eventually completely fainted. When the worried father saw that his beloved son had been safely brought back home, as they were bringing him back, he said to the people nearby, From a considerable distance, he clearly saw them bringing him back, and immediately after they did, he thoughtfully said, "Please don't force him to come over here. Instead, try to find a gentle way. First, carefully pour some cold water on him. Pour some cold water on his face to help him fully regain consciousness." This is also a very effective and commonly used method. For some individuals who have unfortunately fainted, gently pouring cold water on their head can indeed help them to wake up. Then he said wisely, "You don't need to say much to him at all. There's absolutely no real need to tell him anything that I have previously said." Why is that the case exactly? Because the wise father knew deep down inside that his son's current status and position in life was rather lowly, quite humble, and perhaps even somewhat diminished. His willpower, his entire mind, was simply unable to truly converse with someone of such immense wealth and elevated status. If you tried to speak to him directly, he simply couldn't accept it. Actually, this is a very good metaphor. On the surface, it seems like just a relationship between a father and son, running back and forth. It's very simple. But in reality, in our actual lives, whether it's between Mahayana and Hinayana practitioners, or between those who study Buddhism and those who don't, when it comes to understanding one's own Tathagatagarbha, there are truly very many profound meanings contained within. At that time, the father actually knew that his son's resolve was quite weak indeed, rather. He found himself utterly unable to effectively communicate with someone of such immense wealth and elevated status as himself. After a moment of profound realization, he decisively instructed, "Do not utter a single word to him. He is, after all, my own beloved child, and I am his parent. Don't say anything at all." He explicitly told them, "Let him go. Let him truly do whatever he wants to do. Indeed. When he wakes up, just let him go." Actually, he was very wise. Sometimes a person's wisdom is truly important. If a person really lacks wisdom, even the smallest task can end up being ruined. As people in the world say nowadays, things just don't turn out well in the end. Even family matters can't be handled properly. It's because one lacks wisdom, because we ourselves don't have wisdom. Some of our struggling groups simply can't do anything particularly well at all, unfortunately. But if we have true inner wisdom and make proper use of it wisely, actually, each of us should definitely use our own individual. The other day I met a leader from the secular world. He said, "You all have wisdom, and I am also very wise. My mind is also very sharp. You all seem to be able to write books and do well in various areas. I am quite good myself as well, too, you know." He was very confident in himself. After truly and absolutely observing this, I indeed felt that sometimes we really need to stay clear-headed ourselves. Whether we're talking to others, doing something, or considering a problem, we should remain clear-minded. We shouldn't just muddle through all the time, thinking, anything is fine, as long as I have something to eat, that's enough. That kind of attitude isn't right either. Sometimes, whether a person is wise or not, there may also be some differences in their nature. But at the very least, people will always need to have a certain fundamental, essential. We shouldn't be in pain every day. Sometimes we do feel down, and that's perfectly normal. But some people are in pain every single day, always feeling insignificant and timid day after day, saying things like, "Oh, it's so cold, it's so hard, I'm so tired." For some people, when something big happens, sigh, "This is nothing." We all go through things like this in life. Even bigger things than this will happen. So what's the big deal? Once you adjust your mindset like this, a lot of external problems will naturally resolve themselves. But if we don't adjust our mindset, even a little rain will feel like it's so painful when it rains.
The sun is so hot it's unbearable. Sigh, even walking feels especially exhausting. You can't stand seeing these people either. It feels like everyone is really treating you badly. Sigh, even the food just doesn't taste good at all. These days it feels like nothing in this world is right.
That's not the way to be, right? So people really do have their differences sometimes, quite noticeably. Just look at that child right now, for example. He said, please just let him go now. That old man is really quite wise, of course. He's still, really, you all should definitely take a good, careful look at this profound story. I think it's very deeply meaningful indeed, and the sacred Lotus Sutra has its powerful spiritual blessings. As for reading other novels and such things as that as well, some dedicated people tell me they've read the classic Dream of the Red Chamber 4 complete times already. He clearly said this very important thing, let him just go. This poor, unfortunate man has already fully woken up. After he woke up, they let him go. He was truly very happy. He had never ever felt such profound joy before. He quickly got up from the ground and then ran to some of the poorer, more impoverished areas where it was much easier to find work doing difficult, hard labor. He went to places like that, and when he arrived, the wise elder still truly wanted to entice this young child, so he carefully devised a skillful means. He then secretly sent 2 trusted people, and both these 2 had quite rather unusual appearances indeed. They looked haggard, thin, and lacked any air of dignity or virtue. Their faces naturally looked ashen and incredibly dull, often appearing as if they hadn't thoroughly washed their faces in a considerable amount of time. It was as if a fine, pervasive dust naturally seeped out from their very pores. At a glance, their whole bodies, they didn't seem to have any dignity or virtue about them either. Their appearance and everything about them looked rather haggard. These 2 people were assigned the task, and told them quietly, "You 2 should definitely go out there and slowly, gently, and very carefully strike up a friendly conversation with this poor, unfortunate man. Tell him that you also do rather menial work, such as everyday tasks and chores, and that if we work very diligently and hard here at this successful company, his monthly wages and total pay can be easily doubled quite significantly compared to his previous job before. If the poor man truly and completely agrees with this, then you can both gradually start working closely alongside him like this. If he really wants to know what you 2 actually do, indeed, just tell him we specialize in the thorough and complete removal of all excrement and waste materials. Perhaps the poor elderly man has some truly valuable experience in this particular kind of important work. If he asks directly, you 2 should tell him very clearly, we specifically do this exact kind of specialized job right here every day. That way, it will be much better overall indeed." Then these 2 men went out to carefully find the poor old man, and after successfully finding him, they spoke to him very respectfully, as the wise elder had previously instructed them. After they spoke carefully together, the poor desperate man asked to be paid in advance immediately. Otherwise, perhaps he was having a very hard time financially right now. He would have to go somewhere else to find different work. But they were still quite willing to pay him his full wages in advance very generously. Then they diligently started removing the excrement together. They were doing important work, like thoroughly cleaning up all the filth that simply couldn't be swept away easily, because they were still in the Father's courtyard, doing some necessary and thorough cleaning work at the Father's humble abode. Occasionally, the Father would indeed see this young and innocent child. Every single day, he diligently worked with 2 other dedicated laborers, performing the arduous task of meticulously removing excrement, working tirelessly together with him. Sometimes he felt a bit of compassion for him. He would often feel a bit of pity for him. Other times he would certainly feel a bit of blame toward him. Once, from his window, he observed, he saw his child from afar, looking especially thin, haggard, and quite pitiful indeed, truly. And his entire body was absolutely filthy and completely covered in thick grime. He was in all sorts of truly pitiful states, looking especially and utterly miserable. The Father carefully and deliberately took off all the precious ornaments and sparkling jewelry he was wearing, as well as all his incredibly luxurious clothes and garments, meticulously removing them completely from his person. He then, with a sense of humility, put on some rather old, worn, and significantly tattered clothes himself, his whole body covered in dust and grime. And in his dirty hand he also held a rusty old tool for removing excrement carefully. Then he deliberately pretended to be very timid and fearful, acting all nervous and quite hesitant naturally. He behaved just like an ordinary common person doing this kind of work. He sent 2 trusted people ahead of him, and then he himself also pretended to be one of them, following along in that same role. Then he told them, "Hey, hurry up and sweep for me. Get to work. Don't slack off." He acted as if he was the supervisor, even though he was actually the master of the house. When he was acting like this himself, then, because of this unique identity of his, the child, now the Father has already significantly and indeed truly lowered his own status. Actually, this is a very good method for us to guide sentient beings. If we are indeed a Dharma teacher, or perhaps a monastic, then that won't work. In this way, you also pretend a little bit, as a skillful means to gently guide sentient beings. It doesn't necessarily mean you devoted monastics should wear ordinary lay people's clothes regularly at all, but sometimes he still quite deliberately assumes this very humble identity purposefully. Just like the vivid image of cleaning up manure earlier, then he tells them very clearly, as if he's skillfully playing the important role of their wise leader. Then with careful consideration, he skillfully creates numerous opportunities to get close to his own beloved child. Once he finally has the opportune moment, he warmly tells him, "My good child, you are welcome to stay here often." He adds, "Your work attitude and everything else about your performance are truly quite good. If you choose to remain here with us, I am the deputy director in charge of all sanitation operations and management within this establishment. I can certainly offer you a substantial raise along with a generous amount of money, vast quantities of gurumu, which means money, and anything else you might require, such as plates, wholesome rice, fine flour, essential salt, tangy vinegar, and so on, including many other provisions, anything and everything you could ever need. In Tibetan, we'd say things like clothes and such things as that. Whatever you may want to have, I can certainly give it to you. There's absolutely no problem at all. I will fulfill all your heartfelt wishes. You can truly treat me just like a father. Please don't have any doubts whatsoever." Why? Because I'm already quite old now, and you're still so very young and physically strong. You look exceptionally healthy and robust, really quite good. So if we continue working like this for the long term. And I've carefully noticed that among all our dedicated latrine cleaners, well, not exactly latrine cleaners, what should I properly call it? Among all the hard-working staff members, you are never truly lazy, never angry, and never actually complain about anything. It truly seems that the bad habits others often have are almost never ever seen in you. You are absolutely the best. So he enthusiastically commended him in front of the entire assembled group. When we carefully guide some of the devoted Śrāvakas, we also definitely need this particular kind of approach. You are truly the very best among them all. So I have absolutely nothing else to say. From now on, I will treat you as my own precious child, exactly the same as my biological child. Right now, the situation is exactly the same here, precisely as it has been. Though he hasn't explicitly stated it directly, he still doesn't dare to articulate it openly. And as for you, my dear, you should treat me with the exact same respect and affection as you would your own beloved father. From this moment forward, let's firmly establish and nurture this very special kind of relationship between us. You treat me as you would your father, and I will treat you as my son. I am fully in charge of this important work, including all matters and responsibilities within the palace. At this very moment, the poor son was extremely and overwhelmingly happy. He felt incredibly glad and deeply grateful to have such a truly good and supportive leader. However, despite his joy, he still considered himself a lowly and insignificant person. So he never really thought of himself as someone particularly remarkable. He never actually said anything like that at all. So for this reason, he had already gone along with his son, accompanying him on his journey. If his identity was not made clear, 20 years had already passed. Originally, it was exactly 50 long years ago. Now it has already been 70 full years living here peacefully. The poor old father might very well already be 90 years old now. After this, after 20 years had passed, it seemed that his whole mindset and behavior were no longer the same as before. He would no longer feel inferior, because he had stayed here for a long time. Some of us, at the very beginning, were especially afraid. After 2 or 3 days, we weren't that afraid anymore. This includes some of the volunteers and staff members. When they first arrived at the very beginning, they wouldn't say absolutely anything at all. Their immediate action was always to just make a phone call. But after some time, this particular pattern of behavior slowly but surely stopped being the case. Sometimes, when initially starting completely new work, things might feel very unfamiliar at first indeed. Some of our most dedicated volunteers were exactly like this when they were first recruited here too, but eventually coming and going and everything else became quite natural and very comfortable overall. All of this was respectfully said to the revered, world-honored one. At this particular point in time, the venerable elder unfortunately fell gravely ill. He knew within himself that he didn't have much time left to live on this earth, so, with a heavy heart, he told his beloved child, "I have a lot of gold, silver, and precious treasures now. Indeed, the warehouses are completely full of them. You also know quite well precisely how much there is, how to safely access it, and how to effectively manage it all properly." Originally, he was just a dung sweeper, but now he had been promoted to steward. He still hadn't said that this was his child. But now he had just recently promoted him to the position of steward. "Here are the keys to my warehouse. You should carefully take good care of everything that goes in and out of it properly." He said warmly, "I feel very reassured and confident with you finally starting to do this important work responsibly. In fact, there is really no difference between you and me. You must be truly diligent and very careful, so don't waste anything at all, and protect all of this precious world. At this point, after receiving his father's instructions, the poor son knew about all the gold, silver, and treasures, all of this wealth, and that he also had a certain amount of authority. He had some authority over the gold, silver, treasures, and the warehouse. But at that time, he still didn't even have the desire to get even just a single meal for himself. It was almost as if he never truly thought of all that vast wealth as his own personal property. He didn't even have the slightest kind of attachment we might have to a single meal's worth of simple food daily. He had absolutely no such longing or worldly desire, but he still peacefully lived in that place. As it says in the Tibetan text, he still lived in a simple hut. He wasn't living in a completely palatial, truly luxurious residence. The ancient Tibetan text clearly states that the specific place he lived was still his familiar old dwelling. His fundamental mindset also remained entirely unchanged. He still considered himself a truly lowly and humble person. After a significant amount of time had passed, his father eventually realized that his attitude was remarkably different from before. Now he possessed a certain degree of tolerance and understanding, and his entire mindset was completely and profoundly different. That former sense of inferiority gradually faded away. At that particular time, there was a significant occasion when the venerable old elder was truly nearing the end of his life. As he was slowly dying, he carefully gathered all his beloved relatives, the powerful king, and his trusted ministers, including the noble kshatriyas, the common lay people, and indeed everyone else. He carefully gathered them all together and then told them, "All of you present here today should clearly know that this particular individual here, whose name is currently unknown to us, perhaps we should consider bestowing upon him a more fitting and appropriate name. Otherwise, what exactly should we continue to refer to him as? Let us affectionately call him Yuanbei. Yes, let's definitely assign him this specific and memorable name. Yuanbei is my beloved child, my biological son, a precious part of my very being. Originally, in a bustling city, because of a significant and unforeseen event that dramatically altered our lives, we were compelled to leave our home and everything we knew behind. In the end, 50 long and eventful years have quietly passed since then. Actually, my full name is really such and such, and his name is in fact such and such. In this bustling and vibrant city, we truly hadn't met for an extended period of time. Later, after a significant passage of time, we eventually had the opportunity to meet again. In actual fact, he is my beloved child, and I am indeed his father. Today, at this very moment, I am giving him all of my valuable property. All of the accumulated wealth will completely belong to him. At this precise moment, the child finally and truly understood the immense gravity of the situation. When the poor son truly heard his father's words, he was quite overjoyed indeed. He had never ever felt such profound joy and happiness before in his entire life. Originally, he had never actually expected to receive this, but he never truly thought about it, never even considered it. You see, after 20 years, he never expected or asked for it. But in the end, he himself became the owner of the estate. Actually, there is a profound meaning in this. As for the Śrāvakas, even though they did not seek it, when the prophecy was given, they attained it without seeking it. In fact, to attain without seeking is because possesses the Tathagata Garbha. One naturally has this kind of potential. Originally, this child had been wandering for so many years. It had already been 50, 70 years. He had been wandering for more than 70 years. But in fact, it was only in his later years, when his father passed away, that he realized he himself was the owner of the estate. So here, in the end, he originally had no desire or expectation, but later on, if he were to receive this today, he would indeed be extremely joyful and truly delighted. This beloved son also graciously accepted it. This truly great and immensely wealthy elder is actually very much like the venerable Tathagata. We, the humble disciples of the Buddha, are just like this innocent child. Perhaps later on other principles will be discussed. They are also somewhat similar to what was mentioned above. Let's stop here for today.
Kirgana jirano chupan, jupun zonen droa droa
Bandangara Badma Sodargye Bandangara Badma Sodargye Bandangara Badma Sodargye